Undertale is a game about control, and Papyrus is the only character who refuses to use it. When you first play the game, you are presented with choices: mercy, violence, or something in between. But the game isn't just about what route you take. It's also about who else gets to decide what happens next. Because the moment you step into the underground, the game teaches you a quiet rule. The future is fragile, and someone has to hold it. Every major character you meet understands this instinctively. They just respond to it differently. Tuzzle meets you and immediately tries to freeze the future. She walls off the ruins, destroys the exit, and insists that staying is the only safe option. Not because she hates the underground, but because she has already imagined what happens if you leave. She has already lived that ending, so she decides for you. Sans, on the other hand, watches you with half-lidded eyes and jokes that land just a little too carefully. He counts steps, he measures patterns. He doesn't stop the future, he tries to protect it. Because if he can see what's coming, maybe it will hurt a little less when it arrives. Undyne, on the other hand, charges headfirst towards destiny. She believes the future is something you fight. That if you're strong enough, relentless enough, loud enough, you can force the ending you want into existence. She doesn't doubt the outcome, she just wants to be the one who earns it. Asgore stands at the end of the road, watering flowers that will never grow, holding onto a decision that he made a really long time ago. Not because he still believes it, but because he believes the future will collapse if he changes course. So he delays, he waits, he lets time stretch thin around him. And Flowey's control stripped of any conscience. He remembers every outcome. He resets without guilt. He optimizes without attachment. To Flowey, the future isn't something sacred, it's editable. And then there's you, the player. You save, you load, you reset, you rewind mistakes, perfect conversations, and chase better endings, not because you're cruel, but just because you can. Because the game gives you that power to decide what should happen next. Which is why Papyrus is so strange, because he is the only character in Undertale who never assumes the future belongs to him. He doesn't try to decide who you'll become, he doesn't try to lock you into a role, and he doesn't try to protect himself from disappointment by lowering his expectations. He treats every moment like it exists on its own, not as a setup for another ending. And once you see that, the game changes. Take the puzzles. Every single puzzle Papyrus builds for you has a very simple escape. Not a secret one, not a clever one, but a very obvious one. You can walk away, and when you do, Papyrus doesn't say, "You'll regret that later." He says things like, "Wowie, you're really leaving?" There's no threat in that line, no consequences attached. And if you keep backing away, he doesn't escalate. He doesn't lock the room, he doesn't force progression. Eventually, he just says, humans, and that's it. No punishment, no control. Just a quiet emotional response to a choice that he never tried to take away from you. Papyrus creates experiences, not outcomes. Even during his battle, where most characters try to assert some sort of dominance, Papyrus never moves. Think about that. Undyne lunges, Sans dodges, Asgore advances, Papyrus stays exactly where he is. He doesn't chase you, he doesn't corner you, he just lets you move. And his attacks reflect that philosophy. Every attack stops at 1 HP. Not 0, but 1. Which I like to say Papyrus is probably doing some sort of math in real time. He knows exactly how much force he's applying. And I feel like if he could get you down to 1 HP that often, he could end the fight whenever he wanted. But he doesn't. Because his goal isn't to decide the ending, just to keep the interaction going. And then there's the mercy. When you choose to spare Papyrus, he doesn't question it, he doesn't say, "Oh, are you sure?" He doesn't suspect manipulation, he doesn't ask to resolve. He just immediately reframes the entire situation. He says he'll capture you later, that later he'll be better. The next time, things will be different. Not as a threat, but simply as a way to preserve that possibility. Papyrus refuses to lock that moment into meaning. Even the day or hangout reinforces this, because at whole time, this time Papyrus follows you, everywhere. Not to stop you, not to redirect you. He just runs back and forth inside his own house. If you walk in and out, he comments, he adapts, he reacts. It's as simple as that. He takes each moment one step at a time. Just as that, a step in time. Which is why it's so unsettling once you actually begin to notice it. Because in a game built around saving, loading, resetting, and optimizing, Papyrus never once behaves like someone who expects a redo. He lives entirely in the current timeline. And that might not necessarily be because he doesn't know better, but maybe because he simply chooses not to. Take a look at his brother. Sans is suspected to know. Maybe not for certain. But it almost seems that Sans might track timelines, recognize anomalies, and maybe even feel the weight of the resets himself. And because of that knowledge, Sans stops moving. He jokes, he deflects, he stands still in doorways and hallways like a human pause button. Sans' power is containment. He slows the player down. He delays. He gatekeeps progression as exhaustion masquerading as apathy. But look at what that knowledge cost him. Sans doesn't try to change the outcomes. He's already seen them. He doesn't believe that effort survives repetition. He believes in mitigation, not hope. Even in his final stand in Genocide, it isn't about saving the world. It's about exhausting you, making you quit, breaking your patience. Control without hope. Papyrus, by contrast, is almost aggressively hopeful. He doesn't know about timelines, or if he does, he simply refuses to acknowledge them. But more importantly, Papyrus still acts. He builds puzzles, he plans captures, he imagines futures where things actually work out. Not because he's overly confident, but because he hasn't surrendered the idea that effort actually matters. Papyrus has no meta-knowledge, no ability to stop the resets, no leverage over the player, and yet he engages with the game fully. Where Sans uses his knowledge to withdraw, Papyrus uses ignorance or selective blindness to participate. Sans sees the end and freezes. Papyrus doesn't see the end, and therefore just keeps walking. That's the quiet tragedy between the two. The brother who knows too much to hope, and the brother who hopes because he refuses to know. Again, speculation that either of them have any knowledge of the timelines at all. But don't even get me started on the player. They are, by definition, the most powerful entity in Undertale. You decide who lives. You decide who dies. You decide how many times a moment happens until you're satisfied with it. And some reason, Papyrus is the only character that never tries to appeal to that power. He doesn't beg you, he doesn't threaten you during the fight. He doesn't guilt you with the consequences. Even when you're attacking him, even when you are actively hurting him, he keeps reframing the interaction as temporary. He assumes that you'll stop, not because you have to, but because he believes in you, and he believes that you will. This is important. Papyrus never treats the player as a god. He just treats you as a person having a bad moment. Maybe Papyrus could try to stop you. He could try to end the fight. He could try to remove your agency over the game like so many of the other bosses do. But instead, he just caps your HP at 1. He builds fights that you actually can't lose, and he refuses to let your worst choice define the interaction. Papyrus doesn't just spare you, he spares possibility. He behaves as if the future isn't locked yet, even though as a player, you kinda know that it is. Because Papyrus is the only character in Undertale who treats power as something you don't have to use, even when it's yours. And for some reason, Papyrus does something even stranger than breaking the fourth wall. He respects it. He never acknowledges it, never hints at save files or winks at the camera, but he kind of behaves like someone who understands the danger of it all. He doesn't optimize, he doesn't test limits. He doesn't try to learn what happens if he just pushes a little harder. Papyrus stays small on purpose. Contrast this with Flowey, who weaponizes his awareness, or with Sans, who internalizes it until it hollows him out. Again, speculation and theory that they know anything about the timelines, but it kind of fits. But Papyrus chooses a third path. He acts as though each moment is singular. He's not trying to win a game. He's trying to have an interaction inside of one. And that's why he's so destabilizing. Because he kind of behaves like someone who understands that once you see behind the curtain, you can't unsee it, and that some things won't survive that knowledge. Which is why Papyrus, in a way, is kind of the most dangerous character in Undertale. Sans knows the truth and loses hope, in theory. The player has power and very eagerly exploits it. The fourth wall does exist, and most characters either smash into it or collapse under the pressure. Papyrus does none of those things. He refuses the knowledge that would freeze him. He refuses to take action that might close other people's possibilities. And he refuses the awareness that might hollow sincerity. Papyrus isn't strong because he's ignorant. He's strong because he chooses where not to look. In theory. In a game about determination, Papyrus represents something quieter. The determination to keep acting kindly, without guarantees, without control, and without proof that it will actually matter. And that makes him terrifying, because he's proof that goodness doesn't require certainty, only commitment. Which is why Papyrus is the only character that never actually scripts you. Every other character in the game decides who you are. Tuzzle decides you are a child. Sans decides you are a threat, or a punchline. Undyne decides you are the world's greatest enemy, or the hero. Alphys decides you are a project. Flowey decides that you are predictable. But Papyrus decides nothing at all. He invites you, includes you, tests you gently, and accepts your answers at face value. Even after genocide progresses, he still talks to you. He still hangs out with you. He does not update his model of who you are. Papyrus is the only character that allows you to remain unfinished. And that is terrifying, because it means, once again, responsibility never actually shifts away from you. Papyrus, in a way, acts as a moral counterweight to the player. The player resets for better outcomes, cleaner stories, optimal endings. Papyrus never resets anything. He accepts the awkwardness, the failure, the rejection, the imperfection. Papyrus models the behavior all the other characters in the game never reinforce. Just let the story happen. Who knows? Maybe I'm reading way too far into the silly little skeleton man. Maybe none of this is canon, and this is just some very weird interpretation my mind has fabricated. But honestly, what's the point of a good story if you don't read between the lines a little bit? And with that, this is why I believe that Papyrus isn't weak. He's not stupid, and he's not accidentally naive. He is the only character in the game that truly understands that to choose for someone else, even kindly, is still taking something away from them. In a game obsessed with endings, Papyrus is the only character who never actually writes one. And that's why, in a world of gods, timelines, and resets, Papyrus is the freest character in Undertale, because he doesn't need the future to obey him to treat the present as meaningful. And maybe that's the game's final challenge that we all just happen to ignore. Not whether or not you can save everyone, but whether you can stop trying to decide what saving actually looks like.